The Wild West wasn't built on gunpowder alone. It was fueled by grit, hunger, and the smell of meat sizzling over open flames. Step inside a dusty saloon in 1880s Dodge City or Deadwood, and you'd find more than whiskey and poker tables. Behind the swinging doors, cooks worked with whatever the frontier gave them. Beans, salt pork, buffalo, and black coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Cowboys, miners, and drifters crowded around tin plates, eating meals as tough and honest as the land itself. Some dishes were born from survival, others from sheer ingenuity. From son-of-a-gun stew to vinegar pie, every bite told a story of a nation being built, one meal at a time. This isn't the polished West of movies. It's the real one, raw and flavorful. These are the 30 foods served in the Wild West saloons, where history met hunger. Number 1. Son-of-a-gun stew. Son-of-a-gun stew was the Wild West's mystery meal, made from every part of the cow a cowboy couldn't afford to waste. Heart, tripe, sweetbreads, marrow gut, even brain, all simmered in a peppery broth with onions, potatoes, and wild herbs. It wasn't fancy, but it was fuel for men who'd spent weeks on the trail. In saloons from Dodge City to Abilene, a bowl of this stew meant warmth, strength, and bragging rights. Cowboys said your toughness wasn't proven by your aim, but by how fast you could finish it. Son-of-a-gun stew wasn't just food. It was the frontier's definition of grit. Number 2. Fried salt pork and beans. Nothing said cowboy supper like fried salt pork and beans, the backbone of frontier cooking. Thick slices of salted pork were fried crisp in their own grease, then spooned over slow-simmered pinto or navy beans. Some saloons added molasses or onions, but most kept it plain, hot, greasy, and satisfying. It was cheap, hearty, and easy to make, perfect fuel for men who worked from dawn to dark. Served in a tin plate or straight from the pan, this simple meal carried the taste of smoke, sweat, and survival, the real flavor of the Wild West. Number 3. Sourdough flapjacks. Before diners and pancakes, cowboys had sourdough flapjacks, heavy, tangy cakes fried in bacon grease and stacked high in frontier saloons. The batter came from a wild yeast starter that riders carried in tins tied to their saddlebags, sometimes kept alive for years. Mixed with flour, water, and salt, it cooked up crispy at the edges and chewy inside. Served with molasses, pork drippings, or canned fruit if the barkeep was lucky, flapjacks were a meal that stuck with you. Cowboys called them sinkers because they hit your stomach like a rock, but out on the trail, that was exactly what you needed. Number 4. Buffalo roast. Before cattle ruled the plains, buffalo was king, and a proper buffalo roast was the pride of any frontier saloon. The meat was lean, dark, and rich with flavor, roasted slow over open flames or in heavy cast iron ovens. Cooks basted it with salt, fat, and herbs if they had them, turning tough cuts tender and smoky. The prize portion was the hump roast, rare, juicy, and worth bragging about. Miners and gunslingers paid good money for a plate, often served with gravy or potatoes. For a brief, glorious time, buffalo roast wasn't just food. It was a feast fit for the lawless heart of the Wild West. Number 5. Rabbit stew. When beef was scarce or too costly, cowboys turned to what the land provided, and that often meant rabbit. Light, lean, and easy to find, rabbit stew became a favorite in saloons across the frontier. Cooks browned the meat in pork fat, tossed in onions, potatoes, and carrots, then let it simmer until tender enough to fall apart. Some added wild herbs or chilies for extra kick. It wasn't fancy, it was survival with flavor. Served steaming in tin bowls, rabbit stew warmed cold hands and tired bones. For trail-weary cowboys, it tasted like home, even if home was 1,000 miles away. Number 6. Prairie oysters. Don't let the name fool you. There wasn't a drop of seawater in sight. Prairie oysters were bull testicles, skinned, sliced, and fried golden in bacon grease. Cowboys called them cowboy caviar, eaten with pride and a grin that dared you to flinch. Out on the range, nothing went to waste, and this dish proved it. Saloon cooks seasoned them with salt, pepper, and a dash of hot sauce, serving them crisp on the outside and tender within. They were said to build strength, courage, and a story worth telling. In the Wild West, eating prairie oysters wasn't just supper. It was a dare served on a plate. Number 7. Corn Dodger Biscuits. Hard, gritty, and built to last, Corn Dodger Biscuits were the Cowboys' bread of choice. Made from cornmeal, water, salt, and sometimes bacon grease, they were baked on hot rocks or in cast iron skillets until tough enough to survive a week on the trail. Some saloons softened them with milk or lard, but most kept them plain, sturdy fuel for long rides and longer nights. They weren't delicate or sweet, but when dipped in stew or gravy, they hit the spot. Corn Dodgers tasted like the West itself. Rough, simple, and made to keep a man going when nothing else would. Number 8. Hardtack and gravy. If there was one dish that defined hardship on the frontier, it was hardtack and gravy. Hardtack, a rock-hard biscuit of flour, salt, and water, could last for months without spoiling. Cowboys had to soak or smash it just to chew. Saloons gave it life by drowning it in hot gravy made from beef drippings, flour, and black pepper. The result was simple, salty, and barely soft enough to eat, but it filled empty stomachs when supplies ran low. Hardtack and gravy wasn't about flavor. It was about survival. Every bite reminded a cowboy that comfort was rare, but grit was plenty. Number 9. Game Jerky. Before refrigeration, jerky was gold on the frontier. Cowboys and hunters dried strips of buffalo, deer, or elk over low fires, seasoning them with salt, smoke, and sometimes a touch of sugar or chili. The result was tough as boot leather, but packed with flavor and protein. A good piece of jerky could last weeks in a saddlebag, surviving dust, heat, and miles of open trail. Saloons kept jars of it behind the bar, the original bar snack for men who'd rather chew than talk. Game jerky wasn't just food. It was a lifeline, one bite of wild meat that carried the spirit of the plains. Number 10. Chuck Wagon Coffee. Cowboys didn't start their day without a tin cup of chuck wagon coffee, black, bitter, and strong enough to wake the dead. Made in soot-black pots over campfires, it was brewed with whatever grounds the cook had, often reused until they barely colored the water. Some tossed in crushed eggshells to settle the grounds, or even a pinch of salt to cut the bite. There was no cream, no sugar, just pure frontier fuel. Served scalding hot, it kept riders sharp through long, cold drives. In saloons and on trails alike, chuck wagon coffee wasn't just a drink. It was the lifeblood of the Wild West. Number 11. Pickled eggs. Long before bar snacks came in shiny bags, saloons kept jars of pickled eggs sitting on the counter, floating like pale moons in vinegar brine. Made to last the heat and dust, these eggs were boiled hard, peeled, and soaked with salt, pepper, and a dash of cayenne or beet juice for color. Cowboys and drifters would fish one out with a pocket knife, chasing it down with whiskey or beer. They were tangy, sharp, and strangely satisfying after a long ride. In a world where fresh food spoiled fast, pickled eggs were a small luxury, a bite of sour comfort in a rough and rowdy land. Number 12. Pinto bean chili. In the rough kitchens of the frontier, pinto bean chili was a saloon favorite. Cheap, filling, and fiery enough to wake the dead. Made from dried pintos, beef scraps, onions, and whatever chilies a cook could find. It simmered for hours in cast iron pots until the flavors turned thick and smoky. Some added coffee or beer to deepen the taste. Others swore by a pinch of dried mesquite for that campfire kick. Served with cornbread or biscuits, it was a kind of meal that stuck to a cowboy's ribs. Pinto bean chili wasn't just comfort food. It was frontier fuel, spooned straight from the fire to the soul. Number 13. Fried calf brains. Not every saloon dish was for the squeamish, and fried calf brains proved it. Dusted in flour, seasoned with salt and pepper, then fried golden in bacon grease. They were crispy on the outside and buttery soft within. Cowboys claimed it was a delicacy, rich in flavor and fuel for a hard day's ride. Some cooks served them with onions or eggs for breakfast, others with gravy for supper. Though city folk might have turned up their noses, out on the range, nothing went to waste. Fried calf brains reminded every cowboy that in the Wild West, toughness wasn't just worn on your sleeve. Sometimes it was eaten off your plate. Number 14. Cow tongue in brown gravy. Cow tongue might sound strange today, but in Wild West saloons, it was a prized dish, tender, rich, and full of flavor. After hours of slow boiling, cooks sliced it thin and smothered it in thick brown gravy made from drippings, flour, and black pepper. Served with potatoes or cornbread, it was hearty enough to satisfy the hungriest cattle driver. The texture was soft, the taste surprisingly beefy, and the smell filled every corner of the saloon. Cowboys didn't waste a thing from the herd, and cow tongue in brown gravy proved it, turning a humble cut into a frontier feast fit for any gunslinger's plate. Number 15. Cornmeal mush with tallow drizzle. When supplies ran low, cornmeal mush was a cowboy's saving grace. Made from nothing more than cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, it was cooked slow until thick and heavy like porridge. What made it special was the topping, a drizzle of hot tallow, the rendered fat from beef or buffalo, adding flavor and precious calories. Some saloons sweetened it with molasses, others kept it plain and savory. It filled a man's stomach and stuck with him through long rides and cold nights. Cornmeal mush with tallow drizzle wasn't fancy, but it was pure frontier comfort, simple, greasy, and built to keep you going. Number 16. Dried apple pie. Fresh fruit was rare on the frontier, but that didn't stop saloon cooks from baking something sweet. Dried apple pie was the cowboy's taste of home. Tart, chewy apples rehydrated with sugar, cinnamon, and a splash of whiskey or vinegar to wake them up. Wrapped in a rough, lard-heavy crust and baked in cast iron, it came out golden, crisp, and smelling like comfort. Served warm with coffee or whiskey on the side, it reminded men of faraway kitchens and gentler days. In a land built on dust and danger, a slice of dried apple pie was more than dessert. It was hope baked in pastry. Number 17. Wild turkey and dumplings. When luck and aim were good, cowboys brought back wild turkey, and saloon cooks knew just what to do with it. The meat was boiled down until tender, then folded into a thick stew with onions, herbs, and soft flour dumplings dropped right into the bubbling pot. The aroma filled the room, rich and savory, cutting through trail dust and whiskey fumes alike. Served steaming hot, it was a feast rare enough to draw every cowboy to the table. Wild turkey and dumplings wasn't everyday fare, it was celebration food, a reminder that even in the Wild West, fortune sometimes tasted like home. Number 18. Squirrel fricassee. Out on the edge of civilization, cowboys ate what the land gave, and sometimes that meant squirrel. Squirrel fricassee turned humble game into something almost refined. The meat was browned in pork fat, then simmered with onions, flour, and milk or broth until tender and creamy. A few herbs, maybe a splash of whiskey, turned it into a dish fit for any hungry rider. Served with biscuits or over cornmeal mush, it was rich, savory, and surprisingly comforting. In the Wild West, squirrel fricassee proved that even frontier cooking had a touch of elegance, if you didn't mind where your supper came from. Number 19. Biscuits and molasses. Simple, sweet, and satisfying, biscuits and molasses were a cowboy's comfort food. Fresh from the cast iron skillet, those rough, flour-dusted biscuits were split open and soaked with thick, dark molasses that dripped down like liquid gold. It was cheap, easy to store, and gave riders a taste of sweetness in a hard, dusty world. Some cowboys called it poor man's pie. Others ate it for breakfast before the long ride out. In saloons, it was often served alongside coffee or salt pork, balancing grit with a touch of warmth. Biscuits and molasses proved that even in the Wild West, sweetness had its place. Number 20. Salted eel or catfish fry. Down by the rivers and watering holes of the frontier, saloon cooks made good use of what the wild provided, and that often meant eel or catfish. The fish were cleaned, salted, and fried in sizzling pork grease until crisp at the edges and tender inside. Served with corn dodgers or beans, it was a frontier delicacy with a taste both earthy and rich. The salt preserved the catch for days, making it a prized meal in dusty towns far from the coast. Whether pulled from muddy waters or traded from trappers, salted eel or catfish fry was proof that even in the Wild West, good eating could come from anywhere. Number 21. Miner's pot pie. Born in mining camps and saloon kitchens, miner's pot pie was comfort carved from hardship. Cooks filled thick pastry crusts with whatever scraps they could find, chunks of beef rabbit, or chicken mixed with potatoes, onions, and gravy made from drippings and flour. Baked in cast iron pans until bubbling and golden. It was a meal that smelled like mercy after a day in the dirt. Some topped it with biscuit dough instead of crust, others just spooned it straight from the pan. Miner's pot pie wasn't fancy, but it was hearty, hot, and heavy enough to chase away the chill of a frontier night. Number 22. Ham hock and collard greens. Straight from southern roots and carried west by settlers, ham hock and collard greens became a saloon staple wherever pork was plenty. The ham hock, tough, fatty, and full of flavor, simmered for hours with greens, onions, and a splash of vinegar until the broth turned rich and smoky. The greens soaked up the pork's salt and spice, creating a dish that fed both belly and spirit. Served with cornbread or biscuits, it was simple country comfort on a cowboy plate. In the Wild West, ham hock and collard greens reminded drifters of home, a slow-cooked taste of the South that tamed even the roughest range. Number 23. Beans with molasses and bacon. Few dishes define frontier cooking like beans with molasses and bacon. Simple yet full of flavor. It started with dried navy beans slow-cooked until soft, then simmered with crispy bacon, onions, and a generous pour of dark molasses. The result was sweet, smoky, and hearty, a meal that filled a man up after a long day on horseback. Saloons served it in tin bowls beside black coffee or whiskey, the smell alone drawing cowboys from the street. It was cheap to make, easy to store, and rich enough to taste like luxury on the range. Beans with molasses and bacon wasn't just dinner. It was cowboy comfort at its finest. Number 24. Fried potatoes and onions. Every cowboy cook knew this dish, simple, smoky, and impossible to mess up. Sliced potatoes and onions were tossed into a cast iron skillet with bacon grease, sizzling until golden and crisp at the edges. The smell alone could pull men in from the street. Cheap, filling, and ready in minutes. It showed up at breakfast, supper, and every meal in between. Some added peppers or salt pork for extra bite, but most kept it plain, just good, honest food that never disappointed. Fried potatoes and onions were the Wild West's answer to comfort food. Hot, greasy, and perfect after a long ride on the trail. Number 25. Cornbread with pork drippings. Golden, gritty, and full of flavor, cornbread with pork drippings was a saloon favorite from Texas to Montana. Made with coarse cornmeal, buttermilk, and a good pour of sizzling pork fat, it baked up crisp on the outside and soft within. The drippings gave it a smoky, salty richness that plain butter could never match. Served hot from the skillet, it paired perfectly with beans, stew, or a stiff shot of whiskey. Cowboys ate it morning, noon, and night, fuel for long rides and longer days. Cornbread with pork drippings wasn't just a side dish. It was the taste of the frontier baked golden in iron. Number 26. Vinegar pie. Sweet, tangy, and surprisingly satisfying, vinegar pie was a Wild West solution to a lack of fresh fruit. Frontier cooks mixed simple ingredients, flour, sugar, eggs, and a splash of vinegar, into a custard-like filling, then baked it in a rough pastry crust until golden. The vinegar cut the sweetness, giving it a sharp, lively flavor that kept cowboys coming back for more. Served in saloons or wagons, it was cheap, shelf-stable, and easy to make in batches. For men far from orchards or markets, vinegar pie was more than dessert. It was ingenuity baked into a slice, turning pantry staples into frontier comfort. Number 27. Oyster stew. Out on the frontier, seafood was rare, but saloons with connections to rail lines made oyster stew a special treat. Fresh or canned oysters were simmered in milk or cream with a touch of butter, salt, and pepper, creating a rich, briny broth. Some cooks added onions or herbs for depth, others kept it simple so the oysters could shine. Served hot in tin bowls, it was a taste of the coast in the heart of the plains. For cowboys used to beans and hardtack, oyster stew was luxury, a reminder that even in the Wild West, a little indulgence could find its way to the trail. Number 28. Fried green tomatoes. Tangy, crisp, and golden, fried green tomatoes were a southern favorite that made their way into frontier saloons. Sliced thick, coated in cornmeal or flour, and fried in sizzling bacon grease. They emerged crunchy on the outside and tender inside. Some cooks added a pinch of salt or pepper. Others served them with a dollop of molasses or hot sauce. Cheap, quick, and satisfying, they were perfect for cowboys looking for a break from beans, meat, and bread. Fried green tomatoes weren't fancy, but they brought color, flavor, and a little reminder of home to the rough tables of the Wild West. Number 29. Salted beef jerky and cheese plate. For cowboys on the move, nothing beat a plate of salted beef jerky paired with cheese. Strips of cured, dried beef packed heat, protein, and flavor into every bite, while firm blocks of cheese added richness and fat. Saloons serve them together as a quick snack or a light meal, perfect for riders heading back onto the trail. Both items kept well without refrigeration, making them ideal frontier fare. Tearing jerky by hand and slicing cheese with a pocket knife, a cowboy could eat and ride without missing a beat. This simple pairing wasn't just convenient. It was the Wild West's answer to a balanced, portable meal. Number 30. Whiskey bread pudding. When a saloon had leftover bread and a splash of whiskey, frontier cooks turned it into whiskey bread pudding, a rich, comforting dessert with a kick. Cubes of stale bread soaked in milk, eggs, sugar, and a generous pour of whiskey, then baked until golden and slightly crisp on top. Some versions added raisins or dried fruit, but even plain, it was enough to warm a cowboy's belly after a long ride. Served hot with a drizzle of cream or more whiskey, it was a rare taste of indulgence in a harsh, dusty land. Whiskey bread pudding wasn't just dessert. It was frontier ingenuity, sweet, boozy, and unforgettable.